My name is Jim Brown. I'm a real estate attorney. We love to educate agents. We do a thing every couple of weeks, 2 weeks, the Real Trade Podcast. We have a company, New Path Title, and we offer products. I'll go over in a minute. Go ahead, Ryan, take it away.
No, thanks for having me on, Jim. This is something exciting. I enjoy this. My name is Ryan Poole. I'm an active real estate agent. Been doing it for 20 years in the trenches with all of you. I host this bi-weekly webinar with Jim where we're trying to add value to you agents, keep you up to date. One of Jim's favorite sayings is iron sharpens iron, where we share information, help make our industry and our friends better. I'm also the founder of Real Trade, which is an online marketplace, a social media platform for real estate agents. It's an awesome place where you can it's free for agents. You can create a profile and get direct leads off your listings right to you. And you can sell properties quicker through the social aspect of the platform. So very excited for this webinar, Jim. Let's dive into this one. And once you give a high level of what's happening here with NAR, with the class action lawsuits, and then obviously we'll get into the effects of how this affects agents moving forward.
A couple of high level things I want to get out of the way before we jump into the meat. We're going to try to keep this to 30 to 40 minutes. If you guys could mute yourselves, that'd be great. If you feel comfortable showing your face, this is going to be a fun one. We're going to try to do, I'm going to give you an overview of what's going on, and then we're going to open it up for discussion, and we're going to try to have like roundtable. I was telling Ryan before everybody jumped in, as much as I study this thing, as much as I think I understand this thing, I'll always hear a perspective that makes me stop and pause and think. And like Ryan said, I believe truly iron sharpens iron. As a collective, we're stronger than as individuals. So we want to keep this like an open topic. It'll be 30 or 40 minutes. And at the end, you guys have anything you want to throw in the chat, throw it in the chat. If you want to text me for future topics, you can text me. Just go to newpathtitle.com. You can see my mobile number at newpathtitle.com, and Ryan and I will go over some time-saving tools at the end of the show. I guarantee, when was the last time we got a guarantee, will make you a better professional as a real estate agent, for sure. All right, getting into it. Today is October 24th. I'm going to give you guys an outline of all this stuff after we're done, and it'll be available at newpathtitle.com. So today is October 24th. The case currently at trial in Missouri court is called Sitzer Burnett versus NAR, Keller Williams, and Home Services of America. It is expected to be a 3-month trial, a 3-week trial, and the defense arguments should be heard this week. So trial testimony's already started, opening arguments have started. Plaintiffs are home sellers and buyers who are organized by lawyers and filed a class action lawsuit. I don't want to drag lawyers through the mud. I'm a lawyer, but I am going to tell you, this is a reoccurring theme, and something to keep in the back of your mind when you're analyzing who's saying what and what's their motivation. Lawyers organize buyers and sellers with little stake in an overall outcome to make a huge outcome through hundreds and thousands of transactions. The defendants in this case we're discussing today are Sitzer Burnett. No, the defense the case is Sitzer Burnett. It's the National Association of Realtors, Keller Williams, and Home Services of America. There's a second case in Illinois State Court scheduled to commence shortly called Moeller versus NAR et al. That is a huge suit. So this is a big suit. We're going to go over the numbers in a minute. That suit is ginormous. Defense, let's see, there are a ton of arguments and claims, but it all boils down to 2 principal issues. Fairness of the participation rule and the cooperation rule. That's the first issue, and steering and the potential conflict between buyers. I like this explanation. The potential conflict between buyers and buyers agents when some sellers pay higher commissions on properties and sellers on other properties. So there's a conflict, right? In theory, there's a conflict. Buyers agents want to send buyers to one property, and buyers want to go see another property. The buyers agents are going to bring them to the properties with the best commission. The problem with this case is, in my mind, there are a ton of assumptions, right? And so when you try a case, you want to try your case on the facts and the law. But in this case, there are more assumptions than I'm comfortable with. And assumptions they're not fact. And so when we say that things are going to happen a certain way, those are broad assumptions, and they're not necessarily the way the outcome is going to be. So in the back of your mind, whenever we're talking about this stuff, you're thinking about all these assumptions, and you're thinking about who's driving the bus, plaintiff's lawyers. So there's a proposed settlement on the table right now. Oh, and collusion. That's the other biggie, is there's a collusion element in this case. Collusion arguments, organized, Fair Trade Commission violations. Somebody's got their mic on.
Yeah, Wendy.
And there is a proposed settlement on the table with Anywhere and Remax for 83 million and 53 million respectively. So they came out early and they tapped out. It hasn't been approved as of today, again, October 24th, 2023. Those haven't been approved. They still have to be approved by the judge. The Department of Justice has been nipping at the heels for NAR for years through a series of investigations, suits, and settlements. Most principally in 2020, NAR and the Department of Justice settled on several rules not worth really going into, but including the seller's cooperation agreement participation could be reduced to as little as $1. There was also a broad proposed settlement under the Trump administration that was reopened under Biden, and that includes the Fair Trade Commission and antitrust claims for price fixing and things like that, collusion and things like that. I'm not going to make a political statement. It's just that was the time frame. I believe I've read somewhere, and I couldn't find it for the show today. Burnett is a $4 billion claim, the one we're talking about today, principally the suit that's going on. But the second lawsuit was 400 billion or 40. I mean, the numbers are staggering, right? It's like anything else. These plaintiff lawyers, and again, I'm a lawyer. I'm not trying to throw lawyers under the bus, but they throw these staggering numbers on the floor, and then you settle for a fraction, and that's what's at stake here.
Just to be clear too, Jim, there's right now like 3 class action suits that are going against, NAR and participating brokerages, right? So they are saying that NAR does not want to settle, right, until basically everything's covered, right? So they settle this agreement, this settlement one time, and then it's done.
And that's a really good point, Ryan. And so what happens is, if this thing isn't brought to an ultimate conclusion, then you're going to have copycat suits, right? And so the goal for NAR is, you don't want to have a successful claim here and then all these copycat suits, because anytime you have a successful claim, that's precedent. Now you've got, how many boards, how many small and large brokerages across the country. You could have thousands and thousands of lawsuits of varying sizes. All right, so the best summary of the initial testimony and the summary of arguments that I've seen came from the Housing Wire article that came out just a couple days ago. The first plaintiff to appear before the jury was a former high school English teacher. So this is how they set the stage. They had their opening arguments, and the teacher took the stand on Wednesday. And according to reporters from Inman, she's a 30-year-old high school teacher, English teacher, and her mother was a veteran real estate agent. And during her time buying and selling homes, she bought 5 and she sold 4. And they put this dramatic display up of the equity that was eaten up in the homes through commissions. And they backed into this thing, this number where it said 20% of the net equity, meaning the commissions, the equity in the home was as a result of the purchase of the home was commissions, and roughly 40%. So of her last home, when you added up all the commissions, that's what it added up to be. I'm not going to say you can take numbers and bend them to however you want them to bend, but when you put numbers like that in front of a jury, right? This isn't a jury of sophisticated people, and I'm not downplaying jury duty. I do it when I'm called, but these are people that, most people dodge jury duty. These are people who didn't dodge jury duty, and so they're sitting on the stand that day, and they see these numbers, and they're dramatic, and it's going to move jurors. She said that she was necessitated to move to Carolina for a new job where things were less expensive, and she would consider herself a cash-strapped buyer. She says, prior to joining the lawsuit, very damning. She says, prior to joining the lawsuit, she was unaware that commissions were negotiable. If she had known that up front, she would go in a different direction, right? We're talking about one person, one plaintiff, one person's testimony. She didn't realize she was paying 6%. They had another plaintiff, Burnett. She took the stand, a former high school psychologist and public school advocate for her home state sale related in the suit. Burnett, working with a listing agent from a Home Services of America subsidiary on her listing agreement, Burnett said she was asked to circle the commission rate she wanted to pay. And on the commission rate, there were a bunch of numbers displayed. 7, 8, 9, 10% or blank. According to Burnett, 6% was already filled in and she sold it, assuming nothing was negotiable. This is one plaintiff arguing on behalf of all the homeowners in the country. They give some numbers about the commissions. She didn't have any idea that this was negotiable. And then she says, she testified, I paid to have the buyer's broker to have negotiate against me. So her statement is, in her listing agreement, she paid a buyer's agent under the cooperation clause. And what she's saying is she at her portion of what she paid actually went into the pocket of a buyer's agent that she paid to negotiate against her. Clever plaintiff's lawyering, in my opinion.
Very clever.
We had no problem paying for an agent to sell our house, Burnett said. She was not happy about having to pay the buyer's agent, however. The third plaintiff to testify was Jeremy Keel, who works in elder law. Keel's home sale in question was $205,000. The transaction, which he paid 6% commission, split equally between Keller Williams and the listing agent and the buyer's agent. Keel was cross-examined by Keller Williams attorneys during his examination. He pointed out that he did not pay commissions when he was a buyer himself, and that one particular transaction, he paid 5% commission. Keel denied negotiating this commission, stating that he was unaware that you can negotiate commissions. Another one testifying that that he wasn't unaware you can negotiate commissions. Home seller plaintiff Jody Barrett, a former police officer who is now in regional executive director of the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Oh, Jared Brett, I'm sorry. On Thursday, he said he joined the lawsuit after going through the experience of selling his home. After my first experience selling home, I was exposed for the first time to how it works, and I didn't think it was necessary. That I didn't think it was fair. Barrett said, I still don't see the fairness in paying for somebody you're never going to meet and never works for you in any way. I don't think it's fair. Barrett, who did note he was satisfied with the selling experience, his RE/MAX agent was great, and he originally signed a contract to pay 5.5, and there was some mix-up. By the time they got to closing, it was a 6% commission, but it's not really clear, if that was intentional or not. But he did say that the commission was preloaded in the contract. And he did say under cross-examination, Brett acknowledged that he was going through various contracts that he signed and that he knew he was paying for the buyer's agent. So there's a whole lot of people coming up and giving relatively, this is the plaintiff side, relatively, misleading, and again, a lot of assumption-based testimony. They were talking a little bit about NAR. They had plaintiffs had a expert witness. He's an associate of economics at Texas A&M. He was called to the stand Thursday and stated that NAR had a strong economic incentive in the alleged conspiracy to maintain high real estate commission rates. So this is to the other argument that affordability is at an all-time worst, right? So when you look at the multiplier of what income it takes to actually buy a house and pay a mortgage and the things it takes to maintain a home, right now for the last 3 years, the affordability index has been at the highest and most detrimental that we've seen ever. That NAR, National Association of Realtors, books about $225 million a year as a trade organization. I'm not going to go over how much you guys pay the local board If you were to look at that, if you were to look at that number, it's staggering. I'm not going to break that down here. Do the math yourself. There's 65,000 agents. You know what you pay, or about 65,000 agents. In addition to testimony, Thursday's proceeding had a touch of drama after the court adjourned for the day. One or two women on the okay. There was some testimony from Gary Keller. There was some Keller Williams training. They played a Keller Williams training video on how to combat sellers asking to pay a lower commission. And again, we're talking about a group of uneducated jurors listening to this testimony. So they played a video, a Keller Williams training video on how to combat sellers asking to pay a lower commission. When the video says that when agents say to you they'd like to pay a lower commission, that the agent is to respond to the seller, well, if you pay me a lower commission, then there's less money to split with the buyer's agent. And if we pay the buyer's agent a lower commission, we're going to get less traffic and prices to the property. There was another study that was discussed in various testimonies. I guess it's a Texas study. I couldn't find it. I heard about it years ago. And the Texas study says that there were several identical properties in a subdivision. They were all new properties, and they grouped them into 3 properties, and they lumped them as far as commissions. So one property paid a 3%, one property paid a 2%, and one property paid a 1%. And throughout the study, the findings found that the properties that paid the lower commissions got lower traffic, got lower showings, and lower prices. The properties that had the higher commission splits to the buyer's agent paid higher. Now, we've all seen in practical experience, if you have a seller, again, if anybody wants to turn on their video, we'd love to see your faces because I love the nods. But we've all seen in practice, right? The seller that says to us, I want to pay less money in commission, typically has, not always, but many times they have lower quality, lower maintained properties in a worse state of repair, not decorated as well, right? So people who want to save on commissions, it's indicative potentially of a certain type of person. Again, these lawsuits are making a lot of assumptions. And so when you say, is it the lower commission that drives fewer showings, or is it the person who's asking for the lower commission has a less attractive price, a less attractive property? Certainly the Texas study where they use identical new homes flies in the face of that argument, but we all know as practical people in the field every day dealing with buyers and sellers, when you have the seller who says, I want to pay less, they typically maintain the property not as well, and they just have, they're less sophisticated, whatever the case is. There's a number of factors that lead to lower showings and lower offers and lower prices, not just the commissions. But you can see a correlation and make an assumption. And that's one thing I want to bring everybody back to is we're talking about these broad assumptions. Arguments in favor of NAR. Why can't sellers pay a commission to buyers agents to drive more buyers to their property? Isn't this just like someone offering a lost dog reward? It does not have to be the person that found the dog, just information that leads to the finding of the dog, which prompts another thought. In my mind, why can't a seller say I'm going to pay $50 to every buyer's agent who brings somebody through my property? I'd love to hear what everybody has to say about that. Why can't a seller say, I'm going to just give this blanket bonus to anybody who brings a property, brings somebody through my property, put it on Zillow, put it on the MLS listing, put it anywhere, put it in Craigslist if you want. What's wrong with that? So, well, we'll go into that, the shell game thing in a minute. There is no law requiring sellers to get an agent. So this is another argument that was tendered in favor of the National Association of Realtors, the defendants. There is no law requiring sellers to get an agent. Sellers are free to sell on their own. The agents and the fees and everything related to the transaction are negotiable. So that in my mind, that's a compelling argument, right? No one says you have to sell your home on the MLS. If you want to sell your home on the MLS, go ahead, but you're going to have to pay somebody. And if you're not going to sell your home on the MLS, don't. There's no one compelling you to do that. There is no law compelling somebody to get an agent. Sellers are free to sell in their own home. And studies show, just as the study shows that lower commissions get less traffic, studies also show that people don't want to do this alone.
Yeah.
Buyers don't want to sell a house without an agent. Buyers don't want to buy a house without an agent. Sellers don't want to sell without an agent. So when you start talking about the motivations and you start talking about assumptions and you bring in some people with limited experiences, you know, it kind of taints the well. But when you look at broader studies and you ask people what they want to be held, they want their hand held by a professional. And nobody expects if you're going to get your held hand by a professional that you're going to get it for free.
Let's talk, Jim, too. I mean, like the crux of this, like we're all agents here, right? Of this lawsuit. The biggest thing that they're talking about here and of how it affects us and why they're
that's the next thing I wanted to go into was possible outcomes.
Yeah. But I just want to say is like their biggest argument, Jim has done a great job discussing of these people is like the steering, right? Is like us as agents are only going to show properties that have a big buyer's agent's commission, right? That's their fear. And that's kind of like, hey, we're all colluding together to offer these commissions to the buyer's agents. And that's really what the big of the DOJ and this big lawsuit's about, right? Is we're cooperating together, almost like a cartel to have these higher commissions, right? And that's the way that we're going to show these properties only if we get paid a big buyer's commission.
Well, here's the thing, Ryan. At the base of this thing, right, where they'd like to see the cooperation rule go away. Why? Because their allegation is it artificially inflates prices. So what does that mean? You're not going to drive buyers agents out of the picture because buyers are going to want to have representation. And under one of the proposed scenarios, which I've heard a lot of discussion about, is buyers are going to have to go out there and sell themselves like a listing agent, sell their value proposition, and get exclusive rights to list. And Fred's in the commercial space a lot, so I think Fred has to do this as a regular, Fred Schmidt has to do this as a regular part of his practice every day. He does not walk into a transaction, Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, assuming he's going to get a buyer's agent fee, he has to negotiate that with a buyer. And so at the end of the day, who's ultimately going to pay? Buyers aren't going to pay. It's going to come out of the sellers, but the buyers are going to, it ultimately comes back to one person's coming to the table with a check and everybody else is leaving the table with checks. So the buyer is going to pay, and it's kind of like a shell game. So under one scenario, the contract gets another provision in it. Yep. And the provision says that the seller will pay buyer's agent's commission in X amount. So when buyer's agents meet with buyers, they give the buyer the value proposition. They say, I'm gonna do the best that can be done for you. We're gonna negotiate. I'm gonna guide you through the process. I'm gonna give you my expertise and skills to keep you out of transactions that aren't gonna be in your best interest. And in exchange, you're gonna pay me a commission, and we're gonna get the seller to pay that commission. So under one scenario, there's a provision in the contract that says that buyers are gonna be that sellers are gonna pay buyers commissions. I like that idea. I love that idea. But have we done anything different than what's going on now? No. We've given the opportunity for buyer's agents to potentially get more money. Like, so if you had a transaction where the buyer's agent was only getting 1%, now you can sell your value proposition to the buyer. But the buyer might be willing to pay you better than 1% because you've done a great job and you're an expert in the field and they buy into the narrative. And that's great. That's the way it should be. But now, is the seller obligated to pay the buyer's agent commission? No. So
that's right. I think that's where this is going to go. If we look into a crystal ball a little bit, is as a buyer's agent, you're going to have to negotiate your commission with the listing agent and the seller, on every single transaction. I think they're going to be the big thing. But when you think it from this side, now you have your fiduciary duty to your buyer. You're going to have an exclusive, a buyer's agreement, rep agreement with that buyer, and you're going to be representing, saying, hey, I'm going to negotiate not only on the price, but on my commission too with the seller as well. like we're all here on the same side.
We're here on the same side, but here's the problem I see for realtors under that scenario. And I've heard lots of discussion on this between people that are way smarter than me. But here's the problem I see under that scenario. You're a buyer's agent, you do a great job. You find the buyer of the property, you strike this price. In the contract, there is a provision, they're talking about the language that'll be in there. And it's gonna say seller agrees to pay the buyer's agent 3%. The seller says no. They just nix it the whole way. Now you've worked with this buyer's agent through this whole transaction. You got an agreement at the onset of your relationship with the buyer. And in your agreement, it said, you're going to pay me 3%, and we're going to try to get the seller to pay it. If the seller refuses to pay it, sure, the buyer is now going to pay it if you can get him to sign the agreement. But what's to say that the buyer won't go to another buyer's agent that won't? I'm not going to say it's a race to the bottom. I think great agents still have a future, right? Great agents are going to stay great agents, and they're not going to mess around with people who aren't willing to pay reasonable commissions. There's plenty of studies that show at the high end properties, people are willing to pay buyer's agent fees. Buyers are willing to pay buyer's agent fees. At the low properties, buyers aren't willing to pay buyer's agent fees. And in the middle, there's a mix, right? There are plenty of studies that show that. But the problem that I'm having is it opens up a whole nother, I get the whole professionalism argument. I get the whole lock in the buyer and the buyer agent relationship argument. I get the whole fiduciary duty argument. But the real problem I have is it's a whole nother narrative. And so now you're a buyer's agent.
Sorry.
Where the buyer says, the seller says, we're not going to pay a buyer's agent fee. All right, I get it. But now what? Now you go, now I guess you're saying to the buyer that they're not going to pay. So under our original agreement, you're going to pay. So now the buyer is going to come back and they're going to make a lower offer because they know they have to pay you. It's just, ultimately, it's a giant shell game. I'd love to know everybody else's thoughts, but ultimately I see this as a giant shell game where prices don't ultimately come down. There's just a short-term amount of confusion until we all figure out the new paradigm.
Yeah. I mean, I think too that, I mean, you know, part of why they're going after NAR is this big cooperative agreement, right? That they're saying that it's almost like you know, that we're conspiring, right? All of us together to get these high fees. And they're really saying that basically the MLSs now it'll become like a repository, right? For data, the properties for sale. And we won't have the, you know, the cooperative agreements, right? That we have now at the MLS. I mean, this is, from what I've heard, Jim, what a lot of people are saying right now with it. And we have a hand up with Janie. Do you have a question? You can unmute yourself, Janie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on mute. I've been doing this for 40+ years and gone through all this craziness. I've worked with the high-end buyers who have no problem paying 8, 9, 10%. The question I have is, I come from Australia where there are no buyer's agents.
Yep.
You want to buy something, you call them.
That's the European model, yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, the problem I see is that, number one, I think we're going to, well, this could be good. We might put some buyer's agents out of business because now they're going to have to really work for their commission. But the other thing is that I've worked with for sale by owners. I've worked with buyers who I can't find a property to, and I go out scouting and I negotiate my commission on both sides. So, I mean, I don't see what the issue is. And the question I really have is, if it ends up being on the buyer, so many of these people that seem to be fighting this, for lack of a better word, seem to be the lower end buyers. And they're now going to have problems coming up with their money, and they're going to run into problems. You start putting that on the contract. Is the bank going to allow that to be happening?
That's another. Yeah.
That's the question I've got. I mean, I've had no problem, you know, on some deals asking the seller to pay 3% towards the buyer's closing costs. I mean, you can still do that, you know, I mean, unless you, I mean, even in FHA, you could do that. So, I mean, I don't see I think if people are just like making a lot of noise, I think the advantage we'll see is that, you know, listing agents might have a better game at this than the buyer's agents, but I think we might weed out some of the chaff.
So of the statistics that are relevant on your point, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, The average pay for a realtor in the United States is under $50,000. Realtors, 90% of realtors fail in the first 3 years. 90% of all realtors fail in the first 3 years. And it takes an average of 10 years to become efficient. There are realtors that go longer than 10 years to become efficient. And when they talk about efficient, they're talking about compensation for the amount of time spent, right? We would all agree minimum wage is not acceptable if you're a professional. And nobody's telling doctors what doctors can charge. Has anybody ever told a doctor what they can charge? I've never been successful at it. They charge whatever they want to charge. And I don't hear the Department of Justice, I don't hear the Federal Trade Commission. You see, here's a high level problem I have, right? The National Association of Realtors is a very powerful lobbying group. No denying. Wendy, we're going to get to you in a second. I want to hear what you have to say for sure. I'm just super passionate about this topic. I don't understand. And so if you look at the National Association of Realtors as a trade association, what business, the discussions that they talk about, it's associations and brokers educating their agents to get the most commissions they can get. That's what every other association does. I don't care if you're in the National Retail Car Sellers Association or whatever the Car Sellers Association is. That's what associations do. They maximize the returns for their members. So are all associations now FTC violating entities? Are all associations now collusionary groups to extort money from clients? I have a real problem with that. But the thing I keep coming back to is you have this demonstrable number, right? Agents make under 50 grand a year, 90% fail in the first few years. Period, end of story. And it takes 10 years on average to become an efficient agent. What's wrong with making a decent living? And why are we so hell bent on finding agencies that are educating in this one field and saying we're going to attack them to stop educating their agents to make as much money? I'm gonna go back to you, Jane, and then Wendy, you had your hand up for a minute. I wanted to hear what you had to say as well. Go ahead, Jane.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because I think, if we don't have to advertise a commission, we can negotiate our commission with the seller, no problem. And so we advertise no commission at all. We don't advertise the selling or the listing or anything else. And it's up to the buyer to then have his agent negotiate a commission. It's not a big deal. The one thing I'm dealing with right now, I'm a treasurer in our condo association. We're doing insurance. I found out that the insurance industry, I was looking at commercial policies, their commission can be up to 13%. I've never asked anybody doing my insurance on my car, my house, or the association, how much commission you paying? It's just that we throw it out there and we advertise it. We're asking for problems. How many car dealers throw out their commission? How much is the selling person at the dealership getting? We don't advertise that stuff. Your doctors don't advertise unless you're doing whatever, some of the fancy stuff, the elective stuff. But most people don't advertise their commission, and I think that when we do that, we lower our professional level.
You cheapen the brand.
You do, yeah. You cheapen the brand. Your doctor doesn't do it, your attorney doesn't do it, your accountant doesn't. Who the hell does it besides us?
Well, I was about 10 years ago, maybe 14 years ago, my wife and I had a little bit of money with the money manager. And I said to the money manager, how much money do you make? If I park $100,000 with you, how much are you making off my 100,000? I know at the end of the year, I'm making my 4 or 5%, 6%. How much are you making off the 100,000? They could not explain it to me. I pulled out all my money and we put it in real property. We started giving loans and we started buying property. Well, we were buying properties, but we started giving loans. I know exactly what I'm making and it's fully transparent. We have other lenders that participate with us because they know what they're making. But that whole money management, look at the buildings those guys work out of. Goldman Sachs, really? You're managing my pension fund and you need to have a tower that goes all the way up to heaven because you're managing my pension fund? Where's the I don't want to get too worked up, but where's the justice, right? It doesn't make any sense to me. Some of the biggest buildings in the world are insurance headquarters and money management headquarters. Show me the giant real estate offices that even come close to this. Now, we are a disassociated group, right? So but it's just a whole another level of greed when we start talking about, and I agree with you 110%, Jane, you don't hear those people comparing themselves on price. We saw discount brokers, we saw money managers and things like that for a little while. You know, it has its niche, just like discount realtors have their niche, but that's not what the majority of people want. The majority of people have said, we want to have our hand held. That's what they've said. Wendy, I glossed over you. You had your hand up for a little while. Did you want to say something?
I hit it by accident. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. But I do have a question. As far as working with sellers at this point, I mean, I still believe 100% in the full cooperation. So I'm continuing to do business as normal. Is that how you recommend continuing until this is solidified?
Yeah, that was gonna be the end of our discussion, but I'll say it now. This is gonna take a long time to shake out. Just because these lawsuits come to a head at the end of the 3-week trial, there's Morales is right on the heels of that. That's a huge lawsuit. And then the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission are getting in on their own. So no matter what happens in this lawsuit, win, lose, or draw for the for the National Association of Realtors, it's almost certain there are going to be appeals. Those appeals are going to take a long time to sort out. This is not a train that's taken an abrupt turn. This is a ship on a giant ocean that needs a ton of room to make a turn. But I would tell you that a turn is coming. And I would tell you that, like Jane said, it's just it's going to be a matter of sharpening up your buyer's representation knife and be prepared. I'm trying to bait Fred to jump in here because he does a lot of commercial work, and I'm sure a bunch of you guys do commercial work, and women as well. I'd love to have you chime in, but Fred, am I wrong? Right, this is an everyday part of your discussion in a commercial transaction. You're still muted.
Fred's muted.
Okay, I just unmuted myself.
You're loud and clear, buddy.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, we have some standards in the commercial industry that are similar to what happens in the residential, but we're always negotiable because
and
get
so
big.
you
Yeah,
have that discussion early in the transaction.
It's talked through, and everybody decides what we're doing, and off we go. And when I call and I'm getting involved with a broker as a buyer's agent, I always ask the question, what is the commission offered? And we talk about it. And it's as simple as that. And I know it varies, if let's just say that I'm a commercial broker and I have a listing and it's very fairly priced. I know it's going to sell, and I get a call from a residential broker, and I know I'm talking to residential people, and I've sold residences myself. But if they have nothing to bring to the table but the buyer, I look at it a little bit differently. But in most cases, I just share the commission. And sometimes I'll talk to them about it and say, well, how can you help me in this deal? I mean, it's not just price driven. There's a lot of factors in a commercial deal.
Right. Yeah, those are more complicated, and there's more moving parts typically. There's a whole lot of more moving parts. And so I guess I shouldn't say I guess, there's an opportunity for you to sell. There's more opportunities for you to sell your expertise as a buyer's agent. I will say that I get a lot of calls. I never used to get these calls years ago, but the call volume on this one particular topic comes up over and over. And that's people calling me and saying, how can I beat the buyer's agent? How can I beat the seller's agent? How can I, these are buyers saying, hey, I saw this property here, and I talked to a buyer's agent one time. Do I owe him a commission? I want to go straight to the seller. I think there's a real opportunity for us as agents. And again, I never got those calls before. Now I get them regularly, once a week or so. I think there's a real opportunity as an agent, if somebody does contact you, to give them your value proposition, to give them how you're going to benefit them in the transaction.
I'll just add this, Jim. I mean, from what I see coming down the pipe, I think what's going to happen, you know, is there'll be buyers, you know, agent agreements are going to be, you know, become standard, right? That they're going to,
Yeah.
like, you know, they're going to become standard. And as we discussed, you're going to have to say, hey, we're going to try pay the commission here from the seller. If they don't, then I have to be compensated somehow, you know, but there has to be that discussion. You're going to have to basically sell the buyers like you do listing, right?
Yeah.
With your value propositions of what you're bringing to the table, your negotiation skills, you know, doing
What you know
CMA
about
comparative.
properties and septic systems and not septic. Oh, did you know this property is on
Yeah.
septic? Oh, I had no idea. You know, all those little things.
Yeah.
And Brian,
Yeah.
we talked about it earlier before the show started. What's the real opportunity that's available for us agents? I say that because I love agents. What's the real opportunity for agents when the seller doesn't dictate their commission? You know, that's something to be considered.
Yeah.
Now the buyer can go in and do a better, you know, you're in a customary transaction, you're at the whim of the seller's agent's ability to convince the seller's agent to pay you a commission. Well, if it's not a great seller's agent, maybe they haven't done a real good job and they're only offering a point or a point and a half or 2 points or something. If they're a great seller's agent, they're getting 6 on the table and you're getting 3. If you're negotiating your own, now you're not. My point is simple. Now you're going to dictate your future, not the seller's agent, who may or may not be great. I have a question.
No, I would say, I mean, just
Go ahead.
start brushing up on your negotiation skills, right? I mean, especially when it comes to your commission. I mean, that would be something that you can do now, that you can start thinking about now as this lawsuits shake out and where things are starting to go here as far as, you know, buyer agents commission. I mean, that's something that you could start preparing for now.
I love this narrative. I heard this in one of the discussions that I was listening to. When you're talking with a buyer and they start asking you about commission and price cuts, I love this statement. If you think a $200 plumber is expensive, try an $85 plumber. Try the $50 plumber. Try your $25. You know, that whole conversation of quality, you know, price, value. You know, as a law firm, we've given away stuff over the years for free. We always made more money when we sold it instead of giving it away, because there's a perception, there's a value quality perception. It's undeniable. But I love the value. I love the image of, you know, you're giving this plumber all this money, $200 an hour for this little job, and you feel so bad. I can tell you from firsthand experience, I brought plumbers into this office that were $50 an hour plumbers, handymen, whatever, and we had issues that cost me a hell of a lot more money than $200 an hour. That's the type of stuff that you have to. That's the type of stuff that you have to drop on your buyers when you're sharpening your sword. I have another question. Does anybody know, and I believe it's accurate, that the Wall Street Journal has a significant share in Realtor.com? The Wall Street Journal came out with some, you know, I hate to use the word damning, but before the lawsuit started, they published some articles, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, that were very slanted. And I tried to find the research before we started the show, but were very slanted in favor of the lawsuits, the plaintiffs. And who's going to benefit if this thing shakes out? I think who benefits if this thing shakes out is what Ryan was saying earlier, these not MLS listing services. And I can see a world where Compass has a platform. You know, the biggies have their platforms, and then there's this, like Ryan and I were talking earlier, then there's this shared platform where all the data gets shared. It's not an MLS, and it still makes the realtor as valuable as ever. And the connections.
No, I wanted to speak on this because I love diving into this thing. I can see a future here where every brokerage, right, kind of has like a white label solution repository where they put their data for the properties for sale and then get shared onto the other platforms, right? And it could come a day this is something that I get excited about, where us agents actually own a national repository where we can push all that data into, right? And we can share the information there and it's viewable, right? And then we can monetize that as an industry to other service providers that could have access, right? To title companies, mortgage agents. I actually really like that model, Jim. Because
I
then
see
we
that
now
somebody with the
because
initials.
our value, yeah, I just want to say, like, our value as an industry, especially individual agents with our data, I mean, it's massive. Like, our
Well, here's-
data bought and sold and shared and everything off our hard work. I mean, we're out there getting listings, getting photos, going on golf trips to try and get that listing. I mean, it's got a lot of value, right? So being able to monetize that, I think that I can see that as a future and something that I've, obviously with Real Trade, I'm trying to be on the cutting edge of as well. But I think that could solve a lot of problems.
I absolutely see. So Wendy, to your point, nothing's happening quickly. In the stutter step, I think we're going to need to sharpen our edges as buyers agents and get our own commissions. In the long term, I see what Ryan's describing. So a reality, right? So go back 100 years, probably more like 140 years. How did the MLS start? There was a group of, and I hate the term good old boys, but they were the bartender, they were the barber, they were the lawyer in town, and they would meet at whatever the location was, and they would talk about, because the bartender would hear who's selling, and the guy, the barber would hear who's selling and who's buying and who needs, and so they would meet, and so they got together and they shared, listings, they shared information about who wanted to buy and sell. And then fast forward a little bit, it became a club and you had to pay to be in the club. And then fast forward a little bit, that's going back to the 1880s. Then fast forward a little bit, there was a periodical. And I don't know who's been around long enough, but I can remember when a book came out, the listing book. Ryan, was it quarterly or was it monthly? I want to say it was quarterly. And
yeah,
we used to,
I think, yeah, it's quarterly, I believe.
I mean, maybe it went to monthly eventually, but it was a big thick book. And when we got fax machines, you'd get a fax, and that would be the updated listing. And so you'd get a fax in the morning. Fred's nodding his head, so I'm not too far off base because these are faint memories. And
The hot sheet. Called the hot sheet. Called the hot sheet.
The hot sheet. So somebody reduced their price, and you'd either go to your MLS book and we would scratch through the price and write in the new price, or we'd slide the piece of paper in the appropriate page, and then we took turns. Everybody sat at the desk, and I dated realtors for a million years when I was younger. I've always been in real estate my whole life, so I knew this all too well. I'd go with my girlfriend to the office and we'd sit on her. She had hours, she had floor hours, and we'd sit around and wait for the phone to ring. And when they called, right, that was the only access to the MLS. So this paradigm made sense, right? I want to buy a house. I have no idea where I want to buy. I mean, I have no idea what's available, rather. I call the local Keller Williams office. The person who had floor hours opened this huge book and they looked through properties. And I forget how they were organized, Fred. How are the properties organized in the ancient MLS?
Price was one of the things. The neighborhoods was another. I really
the paper MLS. They would organize the paper MLS in multiple of ways.
I really can't. I don't want to really speak to that because I don't.
Yeah, I don't remember.
That was 50, 60 years.
But I remember my girlfriend like whipping through the pages, and then following up with a fax, writing out a fax by hand and sending the fax to the person.
Right.
So that's when we needed the MLS, right? Because it was very expensive to produce those books, very expensive to circulate those books, and it made a lot of sense that she paid these crazy dues. Listen, and I'm all in favor of a trade organization. I don't want to say anything that's too controversial, but is NAR really necessary for us as agents? Is it really necessary for us, right? The MLS, it should be, the MLS is a central repository. There should be a central repository, but the current MLS is an amalgamation, is a permutation of how we did things in the past. It's probably time for a wholesale
This
look.
is part of, and this is part of the litigation, right? If they're saying that the MLS, I mean, this is kind of crazy. And I think you remember this was in 2020 when the MLS said that you can't sell properties off market, right? As soon as you sign a listing agreement, you need to put the property on the MLS within a certain time frame, right? And to me, that was like, wow, they're now dictating, when I have to put it onto their database, when I get a listing, maybe my seller doesn't want to put it on the MLS. Maybe I got a chance here to go out to my own network to see if I can sell it, to a direct buyer. So yeah, I mean, this is part of the heart of this lawsuit, of what they're speaking against NAR and the MLS. And not all MLSs now, guys, are mandatory where you have to join the National Association of Realtors to be a member of the MLS. There's a lot of MLSs that are breaking away from making it mandatory to join the National Association of Realtors.
So I got a comment in the chat that says, why do you think Remax settled? Remax settled because, why does anybody settle? They think they settle because they think they have the weaker hand. I've read a whole lot of arguments as to why they settled or why they didn't settle. In this situation, I think that they were looking at the potential exposures and saying, oh my, this could be really bad for us because we have this jury pool of not sophisticated jurors deciding on very sophisticated issues based on assumptions of how the market will happen if certain changes are made. And I think that they thought that their exposure was less if they settled. But there's always the fear of copycat lawsuits, copycat, in getting this thing out of the way more quickly they thought was advantageous. Here's one thing I will say is that in a adverse judgment against Keller and the National Association of Realtors, etc., there is likely to be a component that will include, don't hate me, you guys, this is just information I'm relaying that I've heard, there is likely to be a component that will include contribution of the agents in favor of the brokers.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about that, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I have. I mean, I think they're going after the brokers, directly, but then the brokers now, if they have to pay a lawsuit, right, that they could go after the agents, you know what I mean? As far as for payments. So yeah, that could happen.
I think there's every possibility that there could be a claim for contribution from NAR, in the brokerages against individual agents. What does that look like? A couple of grand a year for a few years? I don't think it's going to be, catastrophic. And if you're a productive agent, but that is part of the discussion, is that a claim for contribution from the defendants could be made against the agents. If the brokerage unlawfully received broker's share of their commissions, then the agents, should be contributing to the brokerages who are hemorrhaging.
And then NAR just ups their dues, right, to help cover that, right? They up their dues for the next 4 or 5 years,
or they use a special assessment tool.
Yeah.
Let's see, who will conduct that investigation? So, Sarita, who will conduct which of the investigations? Are you there? No. All right.
We're at 10:54, Jim.
All right. So change is likely coming. Summary, change is likely coming. There is no need to change what you're doing today. Think about it. It's coming. I'm getting a lot of calls from brokers who haven't contemplated this issue. I don't think there's anything you got to do tomorrow, but I think there's something you got to plan for in the future. Do I think anybody should exit the business? Absolutely not. I think there's still room for everybody, whether you're hyper productive or you do a couple of deals a year. Education and selling your value is going to be the key regardless. Lenders' rules are likely going to change in the face of this. So somebody mentioned earlier in the discussion about who's going to, under the scenario right now, sellers paying buyers agents fees, so buyers can go out and get their loans more easily. There'll have to be some accommodation made, but I do not think values are coming down. And even if commissions come down a little bit, I don't know that they will or they won't. Prices have gone up enough. I've heard plenty of discussions among more sophisticated agents that say, like, this doesn't hurt them in the big picture. And the contracts will have a new paragraph when this all shakes out. This is not like next month they're going to bring this paragraph in about sellers agent fees, with sellers paying buyers agent fees, but it'll likely be part of it. And your buyer's agent disclosure will say simply, you're going to pay me 3%. We're going to try to get the seller to pay it. If the seller won't pay it, you're going to pay it. And there'll be some buyer's agent shopping. And I love the metaphor. I love the metaphor about, if you think your $200 an hour plumber is expensive, go get your $50 an hour plumber and see how much that really costs you. Right. I heard a great one the other day. There was a buyer that was looking at properties all over the place, and they were buyer agent shopping, and the buyer called me and said, oh, I got this one agent and they were really good. They told me there was a septic system. I talked to a couple other buyers, and all these properties that I was looking at in this neighborhood, they're all on septic, and nobody said that. And this one buyer's agent said to me, it's on septic. And I said, wow, you know, what a revelation. There's a sophisticated buyer's agent probably worth paying a commission to. I didn't say that out loud, but in my mind, like, bing, all these discussions I hear all the time between agents about how buyer's agents are going away. It's just, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case short term, and I don't think that's the case long term. All right. Quick wrap up. I want to show you guys something that we are using successfully all the time. Buyers agents and sellers agents, they're using this. Ryan, can you see, are you looking at title advance?
Yeah, I can
All
see
right.
it, Jim.
So buyers agents and sellers agents, if you are working with buyers and sellers, which is what you do for a living, know what the title of the property looks like ahead of time. Go to titleadvance.io, order a title advance. Now, if you're making an offer, you know you're making an offer on a property that can close quickly or easily or not, right? There's always value proposition in telling the sellers, hey, you got to wait forever. We're going to wait for you. We're going to offer you less money, and here's why. Boom, here's title to the property, and we're willing to hang out for a few months while you clear that code lien or whatever. If you're a buyer's agent, if you're a seller's agent, you're going into your listing appointment, order your titleadvance.io. You're going to walk in the room as the most sophisticated agent. When they interview 5 or 6 agents, none of them's bringing title. You're going to bring title. Seller's going to be laying in bed that night. Think about the Rolodex of people they talked to that day. Oh my God, Ryan was so sharp. He showed up with the title advance. We want to hire that guy. And if you find a title problem and you're working with a seller and you get your title advance, we can start work today on getting that thing fixed. So by the time we get a contract in the door, we're working 2 or 3 or 4 weeks sometimes ahead of time. Now we can resolve the issue ahead of closing. So order your title advances, use them, they're free of charge. If you do find title defects, we have another document, we have another report you can order that is a title commitment. You'll get credited at the sale. When you actually close the home, we can go at the title commitment. That's an actual roadmap to fix the problems. Title advances identify them. The title commitment is a roadmap to fix them. Use your title advances. Go to realtrade.io.
Well, I was going to say, no, I love title advance, guys. It's actually saved me on some deals. It's a free service that Jim provides here with New Path Title. It's awesome software, Title Leap. Cool thing is we have an integration right on Realtrade too, where you can order a title advance right through Realtrade as well. And it's a great time saver, especially with these MV Realty liens that are out there right now. It could save you a lot of time. It's an awesome tool.
No, that's a good example, Ryan. So I had a seller call me the other day. They had a realtor call me the other day. They ordered a title advance. The property had an MV, as in Monkey Venus, had an MV Realty lien on it. These are liens that are years and years typically old, where sellers have obligated themselves to pay commission to MV Realty. Now you're the new selling agent walking in, and now the seller at the closing table is going to pay 2 commissions, and they're going to be screaming. You can identify properties with MV Realty liens ahead of time. And if you're a buyer's agent, you can identify the MV Realty lien ahead of time. And here's why: because every single time I've seen one of these things close and they found out about it in the last minute, in almost every single transaction, the realtors had to, the new realtors had to commit part of their commissions to get the thing closed. I think Ryan had personal experience with one of those. And
yeah, this was before title advance. It ended up, as a listing agent, I didn't know that they had an MV Realty lien on the property, and I ended up having to do the deal for almost free. So Point being, it can save you a lot of time and effort too. And I do want to speak just real quickly here too about the awesome software Title Leap that Jim has at New Path Title. It's almost like a free contract coordinator for us agents. It keeps track of all your drop dead dates, all your documents, all in one simple place where you can search and find them. And it's an amazing tool, and it's free as well. Jim's providing all these cool free tools with Title Advance and also Title Leap. So
Well, if you go to New Path Title, it says right at the very top, we're all about the agent. Title agents don't exist without realtors.
Yep.
We get it.
No, and Jim's always adding value, obviously, here with this bi-weekly webinar. We're going to touch, I'm excited more too to revisit this, Jim, as these lawsuits shake out on this particular
I think we got to do that. Yeah.
And two, as we move forward here, if it does turn out like the buyer's agents now are going to have to sign, buyer's agent agreements and negotiate their commissions, we can help with that as well as the industry goes through that. So we're excited.
Well, the thing is, right, when one person is doing something, they're unique. When everybody's doing something, you're one of the crowd. So if you get a buyer that thinks they're going to shop and go to a bunch of different buyer agents and they're going to find somebody who doesn't make you sign a buyer's agent agreement in the future, if everybody's requiring buyers to do it, we just have to unite as a team and not get accused of collusion. We have to unite as a team and provide united fronts. And that's the way this thing, again, nothing's going to happen in a hurry, but that's the way I see this thing going. My personal opinion. What can happen?
Yep.
The worst case scenario is NAR and the MLS get shut down and everything's a free-for-all. The best thing that can, the other extreme is nothing happens. It's going to be something in the middle, right?
Something in the middle.
Yeah.
Awesome. I just want to speak too real quick about RealTrade, guys. It's an online marketplace and social media platform for real estate. It's free for agents. I tell agents literally take 10 minutes, create your profile. We then import all your listings. You're the point of contact. There's thousands of buyers and sellers on the platform, and you can literally get a double dip from just doing that, right? Or you could have a buyer reach out to you that they need a buyer's agent, or contact you directly off your own listing. So, and the cool thing is that I want to add value is we have awesome service providers like Jim that are on the platform that you can connect with that are offering their services. So it's a great place to not only get connected, find buyers and sellers, and sell properties quicker. Check it out at realtrade.io.
Right, and the other thing was I was listening to all these discussions on the future, right? If you have a property that your seller doesn't want to list, this happens all the time in New York now. People don't want to list their properties. They think that it just cheapens the brand. They go stale. They want to have it exclusive, whatever it's going to be. RealTrade is a way to satisfy those sellers that don't want to list their properties. And buyers, if you want to buy off-market property, if you're looking for off-market properties, you can go on RealTrade. You can make a little social post and you can find sellers who have properties that aren't listed. So this is kind of like a vision into the future of things to come, which I see there's going to be more need for stuff like this for sure. But I see it when people call me from New York and they say, the sellers call me and they say, hey, I just met with my listing agent and they don't want to list the property. I'm trying to wrap my head around that, but now I see the value, right? Listing the property.
I know it is. I mean, you can share, like I said, any kind of properties that you want on the social feed. Right now, we have almost 18 local South Florida agents that are on there that are sharing information, coming soons, off market, buyer needs. It's fun. Go and check it out. It's free for agents. I tell them to check it out. Cool thing is, like I said, you'll see Jim on there and other service providers. I mean, everything from solar.
Ryan, you don't fleece the agents like other platforms?
I know. I mean, I just had an agent guys call me the other day, go, Ryan, I got a lead from RealTrade. We got this deal under contract. They're going to make an extra 20 grand,
Well, but I'm even thinking like, here's the big problem that I have, and this will be my last comment on this topic. I promise. Here's the big problem that I have. You got these platforms, you work your ass off, you get the listing, like Lorraine says, you got to suffer through a golf game. I think it could be a heck of a lot worse than
Boat
that.
trips, golf games, lunches, dinners.
You spend a lot of time and money getting the listing, and then you've got to pay another platform. You put it on the MLS sells your data stream to some other platform, and now you got to pay that platform to be the premier agent or the whatever. The whole thing stinks. Things like platforms like Ryan are the future for sure. All right.
Thanks, Jim.
Well,
this has been a great topic. This has been a great topic, Jim. You did very well. Excited for all you to come here on and get educated. And this is what we're all about. like I said, Jim's favorite saying, iron sharpens iron. We're sharing information. We're going to make our industry better. And we're going to definitely visit this topic again in the future.
Next time we visit it, we need more screens, more cameras, and more faces and more interaction. All right,
Awesome.
you guys have a great day.
Have a great day. Good luck out there. All right.